they can buy any platform services. If they don't have a strategy behind it, magic is not gonna happen.
We always tell people present where you're going to be at if you're doing it virtual. And we had somebody show up and present from their phone in a car.
Welcome everyone to a new episode of the Event Effect. We're so happy you're listening with us. Today I'm joined by two amazing event professionals. You probably have heard of them, Will and Marie. I'm so happy you're here. Thank you so much for being here. Today we're going to be talking a little bit more about the event tech side of things within the event industry. And the first question we always start off with: how did you actually ended up in the event industry, and more specifically in the event tech realm? Marie, maybe you would like to kick this one off.
Thank you so much for having me here today. I'm super glad seeing you and seeing Will again. Yes, so to answer your first question, I started in the event industry in 2018. I started working for a stand builder company. So I was selling custom exhibit booth to exhibitors that were coming from all around the world to exhibitions in the US. And then obviously when the pandemic hit, I had to switch to the tech side of things if I wanted to stay in this industry. So I found an opportunity joining an event platform, and that's where everything started. So yeah, that's how I started.
Awesome. Thank you so much for that introduction, Marie. It's a pleasure having you again. And Will, how was that for you? I know we also, I am a big fan of DJing and music. I know you also have some experience there. Can you explain us a little bit more how you got started here?
Yeah. My journey is very long. So I started Endless 15 years ago. And before that, I was a DJ, similar to you. And it was kind of like DJing was my combination of technology meets music. And for me, it was like drum and bass and electronic music for me. And so I started DJing in my bedroom, and then eventually started getting paid to DJ. And then eventually I was like, hey, I should start a DJ company. DJ company grew to becoming more of like a DJ entertainment plus production company when we started doing massive college and high school events and like dance parties and things like that. Eventually, started making my way into corporate events, dropped all the entertainment stuff and just focused just on production, because at the time we were hiring so many production companies, we thought we could do it better. And that's a whole story in itself. And so like a lot of my roots in the more high end events and things like that are in production. And then, over time, when you're doing production for so long, you start to realize that like, hey, the event tech side is kind of like adjacent to it. So we started offering event technology to our clients, everything from their event apps, registration to, even managing the internet at events. And so we did that for a long period of time. But one thing that kind of happened is we started writing a lot of content about the events industry and becoming a thought leader for it. We have 3 podcasts of our own. We were writing blog posts every single day. And so people started coming to us for things that weren't event tech and event production related. And they were saying like, can you just do the entire event for me? You guys seem to know what you're doing. So we basically slowly started making the pivot towards event management. And now we're a full scale event management company. And definitely like my roots are in, the event side of things, but also, production, technology, all those things like that. And yeah, like one of my favorite things to do is talk about event technology, because I am so nerdy. Like I'm the nerdiest of nerds for sure.
We can shake hand there. Huge techie / nerd. Absolutely a big fan. So happy to be surrounded with like-minded people. And thank you both so much for your introduction. I think it's always good to kind of get a grasp of how you can get started in the event industry, and also what kind of different paths there are to becoming an event professional.
It's very funny because Will mentioned that he was a real nerd. And I'm the opposite. I had to learn technology from scratch when I started for an event platform. I cried for the first 2 months every day. I was like, how am I gonna understand what is an iframe? What is it? What is a widget? And then after a while, I got, I learned and I understood it. But at the beginning, I was oh my God, I was completely overwhelmed by learning all those things.
I can imagine. There's quite some terminology that if it's your first time hearing them, you're like, what? But no, I love it that you actually were resilient enough to get to learn the technology and fully embrace it. And I think that's what we need, right? No one can know it all. And I'm very glad that you got.
I mean, I think most of event organizers had to learn with the pandemic how to manage technology.
Yeah, it's like
forced. So I think I just felt exactly what other event organizers were struggling with. So it's it's funny.
Absolutely. Technology is not per se the first thing that you learn as an event professional. So I can 100% agree with that. In terms of like what you're currently going through in terms of the trends you're seeing in event technology, can you maybe highlight a few of those that you're currently seeing, Marie?
Yes, obviously, I think the 365 year-round engagement, like kind of community platforms are taking a huge, are having a huge spotlight right now in our industry. And I think it's a very wonderful, opportunity that we discovered with the pandemic. Also, I think accessibility is a huge trend. I think we need to make our platform, and I'm talking mostly about event platforms because this is where I come from, but there's other technology, of course, in events. But for the event platform side of things, I think accessibility is also something that we need to think more and more and develop features that makes our platform and our events more accessible. We need to develop features that are going to be easy for the users to set up, let's say, closed captioning to understand the content of an event, but also to make it accessible with, the way the text is written on an event, the way the information is provided. So I think this is a huge trend, and we have to work on this and improve how we can deliver our accessibility, our events with accessible features. And for the 365 year-round engagement, of course, it generates revenue opportunity for during the whole year. So this is something that I think most of, big event organizers are dreaming of, but it's also a process. So it's going to take time before we are able to understand fully what are the best, practices and what are the best strategies. And we will also have to always renew those strategies. So, but I think it's an interesting trend, and I think we're going to get a lot of results and many insights in the upcoming months and years about this.
I couldn't agree more. Like, funny thing, I see Will nodding his head. I have a feeling the event props community is gonna come up very soon as well. But
how'd you
agree.
know? Oh my god, you know me so well.
Absolutely agree. I think inclusivity, or like making your event accessible and inclusive for everyone, is a very big thing. Not just for event platforms, but for event technology in general. The technology can really elevate the possibilities for accessibility very well. So I think it's a very good trend you mentioned, Will. Besides the community, I'm sure you agree with that part. Like any other
definitely.
trends you see going on?
Yeah, I'm definitely all about the community stuff. Like, obviously, that's why I created the event props community in the first place. So definitely, like, there's tons of rants about Will talking about that all over the internet. I definitely agree with the accessibility portion too. I was looking through like a gift guide The Verge published last night, and they had these cool shoes that Nike made called like the Nike Go something, and it's like a shoe that bends up to make it so you can slide your foot in, so you don't have to bend over to like tie your shoe. And their whole play with it is like to make shoes more accessible. And I thought to myself, shoes have been the same for like hundreds of years. And no one's ever thought about like maybe there's somebody who might struggle to get their shoes on. For example, if you have cerebral palsy, for example. And I was just like, man, like we could do so much better in the events industry, because we just tend to like be like, oh yeah, accessibility is the thing. Like I'll put budget towards if I have to, or if my audience makes me do it. But in reality, it's like, oh guys, like with virtual events, there's an ability to reach more people all over the world, including making more accessible too. So I love that. Let me try to pick something different though. So I think one of the biggest trends I see in the events industry is definitely the interesting place we are in budget of event technology. So one of the things I see shifting hugely in the events industry is event technology companies have come from like a booming era of 2020, 2021, where they're making so much money hand over fist, charging customers where they want to charge. And now that everything's kind of slowed down, you not only have planners who are, I'm just going to go 100% impersonal, and all that money that we're spending on hybrid and in virtual is kind of drying up in some ways, but also too that now people have time that, someone doesn't have to be rushed to be like, what platform am I going to pick? I only have 3 days to figure it out. And oh my gosh, okay, sure, I'll just sign your contract. Now they're bidding it out against 5-6 different companies. So what I think is going to happen is the cost of technology is also going to drop since 2020, not necessarily I think like overall in anything, but I think since 2020 we're going to see a huge drop in cost, and I think what that's going to also then fuel is drop in revenue, potentially drop in profitability for these event technology companies. So I think you're going to see a ton of mergers, acquisitions. You're going to see a ton of companies try to find new unique ways to get revenue, i.e. community, which is one reason why we see a lot of event technology companies pushing community. And then also too, I think that we might also then see necessarily the cost drop, but then I think you're going to see is that then potentially the costs then rise to try to make up for that lack of customers. They're going to go from having 1,000 customers to maybe 500 customers. How do I stay at the same amount of revenue that I have? So the thing I'm kind of preaching this year going into 2023 is just be prepared for costs to go up in general, and be prepared that everybody's going to be trying to fight the big R word, which is a recession. And whether it's going to happen or not happen or has it happened, doesn't matter. All it takes is for a company to hint that it's going to happen, for there to be layoffs, cost cutting, cost rising, all these things like that. That one's not fun though. So yeah. Go ahead, Marie.
I do have a question for you, Will, because from my side, when I meet organizers, they tell me their budget for their event platform technology or mobile app. But on your side with Endless, you kind of know more about their global budget for their event. Do you feel that since we are back to in-person events, that they have an extra budget for the technology side of things for their platform, or do you feel like they have the same budget as before the pandemic, and they just try to like use this budget and including everything in those budget lines?
That's a great question. I think that I definitely see budgets have gone up on event technology since the pandemic. Like if you told people, hey, what's your event technology budget? They'd be like, I'm using, $20,000 for my registration system. You're like, cool. Like, is there a platform for people to comment on, engage in? What like polling system you're using consistently across the whole country? They'd be like, I'm not spending any money on that. And I don't want to. But now, I think people are at minimum at keeping a platform plus a registration in it. However, the thing that I think I'm most disappointed in terms of lack of adoption, in terms of increase in budget, is that we've gone from this ability to measure everything with virtual. You can see what page everyone's been on, you can know how long they spent at this vendor. Well, for you to do that in person, the two ways to do it is through RFID tracking or Bluetooth Low Energy. And I'm really sad that no people aren't willing to drop another $100,000 to get that same level of tracking for their events, and instead are just I guess we'll just do the best we can with our platform and all these things like that. So that's an area that I'm really surprised didn't get a lot more spend, and I think that's an area that is a big miss, because we're losing out on this chance to gather even more data and firsthand data, I think, for our attendees to be able to make the event better, make the sponsors' experience better too.
I agree with you, but I have to say that even during the pandemic, when organizers had access to all those analytics, they were underused. I think there is still work to do to help organizers understand how they can really use that data and understand their attendees' behavior, build better events, create more monetization opportunities. I do meet organizers and I ask them, do you have your data from your previous events? Do you understand what worked and what didn't work, sorry? And I feel like a lot of people, I was expecting to know by heart, that they would know by heart what worked and didn't work, because once you know, once you have your event, it's happening, then you get the result, you look at it, and it's the main goal of, you know, having an analytics. It's to be able to understand what you're going to make better for the next edition. And I feel like even if we provide all those analytics, they are underused. They
Yeah.
are not. Yeah, I think there's a lot of, you know, we have to educate and help support organizers in understanding how they can use that data to create more, to do better, to generate more revenue.
Totally. I agree with you. And, you know, it's funny because I always joke that I'm like, we got into, you know, event management, not because we like data numbers and things like that. Otherwise, we get into the finance analytics world or maybe even deeper into the tech world. But we got into this because we love the way things feel and the way it looks. And it's very like, you know, design driven. And the challenge is that we're like, we have to definitely educate, I think, into this new level planner who can use both sides of their brain, the analytical side and also the design creative side. And I definitely think that's a trend that we definitely are going to see is like, we need to be using data way more. And is this opportunity in your exact point to like be able to actually design our events based on this data rather than just it being like collecting and then just, oh, I'll throw it in the closet and look at it later, you know?
Such a good point. I really love it. I think we touched upon pretty much 5 major trends that really play a big role in the event industry. In terms of those trends, like what are you currently experiencing? Can you name some real life examples of what you're going through with event tech for yourself? Maybe Marie, you can start this one.
I mean, I meet I meet so many organizers in different industries, some of like from the for-profit organization, but some are from associations and corporate business. So, I mean, with each of them, the goal of the events are very different. So, my work is really to assist them to build a strong strategy, because at the end of the day, I mean, they can buy any platform services. If they don't have a strategy behind it, magic is not going to happen. So yes, there are technologies that are stronger than others that provide more features, for example, networking, and others will have maybe the marketplace and e-commerce side of things. But at the end of the day, if they don't have they didn't define their goals and a strategy around, you know, networking, engagement, content delivery, but also communication, with is a huge piece. Nothing's gonna happen. So in the real life, what I do is I assist them in building that strategy, often based on previous in-person event that they held before the pandemic. We will help them create that plan and, you know, understand how they can just increase their ROI with new monetizations opportunity, new sponsorship opportunity, because with virtual and online and hybrid, there's just more options. So how can we take what works and just, you know, make it even better and with more options and more opportunities? So that's my role in real life right now.
Love it. I think a very crucial role, obviously kind of translating your event goals to actually how can you activate that into an online or an hybrid environment. I think it's one of the most crucial aspects for event professionals to make sure that their event is actually a big success. How is that for you, Will? What does your day-to-day life look like? What are you experiencing?
Yeah. When it comes to the trends that we talked about so far, examples for how they've been utilized, I'll start with the community portion since I'm so passionate about it, that piece. So Starting with, the great example is like when I created the event props community, like I kind of just did this as like on a whim to be like, what would people like? Would it, like, I was ready for it to fail like day one, but I think I saw so much positivity and excitement around it, and people be like, hell yeah, I totally agree with this idea that like social media is not necessarily the best place for me to be all the time. Let's create something more niche and more, hyper focused. And I got a lot of great feedback from it. So I think like, if anyone's looking for example, the community portion, like the event pros community was a great chance for me to say like, here's how you can use an event app to turn it into a community to build on energy from a previous event. So that was like one example that I saw that was really, really successful. And there's tons of learnings and stuff about that we can definitely do a full hour-long conversation just about my learnings from that. But one example that I'll use that a client of ours, we have a client called Ursa, and we did a lot of their event stuff for their previous event. And then we told them like, hey, we also do community management. They're like, ooh, we like that trend. And this is just an example of what we're seeing with a lot of our clients is that they're like, okay, I would like to build a 360 community based on what I've been building. So let me take that, platform that was already built out, and let me then change some graphics around. Let me change maybe the subdomain instead of it being like Ursa 2022 to like Ursa flat just by itself. And let's now encourage people to sign up and get into it all year long. And then when we do our event, it just happens inside that platform, and it just takes all that energy that's been happening year round and then just gets amplified even more. So I think that was a really successful example of like how we basically took what we do on a daily basis, doing this for events, but now we're doing this every single day for this client to manage their community moving forward. So I think that's a great example of how you can take the energy and the excitement that you built inside this existing technology and turn it to year round. And then one last idea I'll have that isn't related to community, because otherwise I will only talk about community, is like the idea of recognizing that budgets are changing and being willing to reallocate them. If your 2019 budget only had $10,000 for event technology, you might need to be like, oh, I need to be spending $30,000 this year. Where am I going to get that budget from? So the thing I'm encouraging a lot of our clients to do, and everybody that is within earshot of me, is to take their budgets and just destroy them. Like, as I whack my microphone, take your budget, destroy it. Like, just start new with a new Excel spreadsheet and start working from that total number that you have. Don't just sit here and say, oh, I have to spend $250,000 on catering. Instead, think to yourself, a crazy idea, this is my favorite crazy idea to share, is take your catering budget and drop it to zero. Take that $250,000 you had, allocate it wherever else you need to, and do this. Tell your attendees, hey, here's the 10 restaurants that we're within a 2-block walking distance. Here's the style of food they have. Here's what we recommend. Tell all those restaurants that you're sending all your attendees to them, and let them go there for lunch. Give them a 3-hour lunch rather than an hour lunch, so they have real time to enjoy the conversations and the food that they have. They have time to walk over there. And I bet you your attendee satisfaction will go up, because 2 things. You get to spend the money on things that actually matter, not just hotel catering food. And also 2, that people will actually get to enjoy the local food that they have within that restaurant, including, if you give them more time, better, deeper conversations with other attendees, which is the whole point and why people are going in person now. Don't try to cram 20 hours worth of content into an 8-hour day and make people go content. I'm just whacking my microphone like crazy today. And instead, like, try to focus on unique ways that accomplish the same goals and utilize those budgets in other places.
I like your idea with, just, starting with a new budget and from scratch. And I would like to see that when it comes to another trend, sustainability. If we could remove if we can just brainstorm and list everything, all the money that we spend on flyers, printed banners, things like that, and say, okay, we have no budget for that. How can we market our event? How can we use technology, for example, to eliminate some spent on, unsustainable items? I think it would be a great idea. We should brainstorm with, that concept of just starting from scratch a new budget.
Instead of thinking outside the box, crush the box.
Yes, absolutely. Absolutely. I feel like there should be a follow-up coming on this conversation very soon. Any event professionals interested, feel free to reach out. We'll make sure that there's a huge brainstorm session on this, because I do also really like that idea of completely stripping what we kind of know or what we normally would have done in events and take it to a whole other direction and just think like, what are the things we already have that we can use to allocate budgets, but also enhance the experience. And in this case, the example that you mentioned will like actually foster the local food scene as well at the same time doing that. Really love it. Marie, I was kind of curious to hear, like, in terms of you were saying, like, you really strategize with companies. Like, can you give like one more in-depth example of how you actually help someone to take what they know and put it into a new, in this case, online environment? Can you name one example? You don't have to name the client, but just kind of how you help them, obviously.
Yes, well, it really depends where the organizers start. For some organizers, they will need help with the building of their platform, or they need that white glove service because they don't have the resource to learn a technology and to build their event, or even to elaborate and define what they need in their mobile app. So with some organizers, we will need to help them define, okay, so their goal is, for example, offering more networking opportunities. So how can we help them achieve that goal? So we will need to define with them all the features that they will need, because they don't even know where to start. And for other clients, for example, what they want is the return on investment, and they sometimes have so much more spent post-pandemic, because they need to add that technology. And with the inflation, they also see their customers, so the exhibitors, for example, not spending the same amount of money. So we will need to help them build sponsorship opportunities, exhibitors packages, but also to assist them in how they can become a consultant for their customer. So their customers sometimes have a specific budget, and they won't necessarily understand how they want to invest their budget in the event. So we need to help the organizers understand what is their customers' need and how they can become consultants for them. So there's honestly plenty of possibility. It really depends where the organizer starts. I do very often assist organizers in building their full community strategy. So, okay, so how will you create more networking opportunity? How will you generate more revenue? Because it's not because you have a platform that there's going to be magic and people will engage on the platform. You want them, exactly. You want them to get involved. So how are you going to do this? How will you become attractive for your audience to, log in your community, stay connected, interact, get to your event in person as well, because it's a key element of your community. So we have to elaborate all that strategy from scratch very often and help our clients, understand how they can make their event and community a success. Because it's not because you have a platform that everything's going to happen by itself.
Absolutely. Strategy is a big one. And I think Will also knows that, like, you know firsthand, like, building that community, it takes a lot more than just an amazing platform to facilitate it on. You need to activate people and really get them hyped for it, and also give them enough reasons to come back all the time. Really like that.
And you also want them to get involved in it. You want them to post content. You want them to, because the organizer won't log in every day to create new content to just to be seen by his audience. The goal is to have the audience participating and auto-generating content, because this is the main goal of a community. And Will, tell me if I'm wrong, but what you want is a safe space for your audience to be able to share, to be able to interact and get connected together.
Well, you're definitely right. Like thinking really practically and simply about this. Like, if you logged into the Event Pros community and you saw a post from Will, it immediately is going to make you not post. So, like, strategically, I sometimes like have things I want to say or things I want to post. I'll be like, oh, I posted and I'm within like the last two posts, so I'm just not going to post it. I'm gonna wait for more people to come in, and that's one reason why like I encourage everyone to welcome themselves into the community and post an introduction. Is that the more that it shows more people going on, it also just creates that effect of people being like, oh yeah, this is that safe place to be in, and I want to do this, and it's not just the Will show in here. And that's something I'm very like cognizant of. Is like, hey, how do we make sure that we're doing that? And one thing I want to add for sure, like to highlight, you said, is like, event technology is not the solution. It's the strategy that you put behind it, and then you use those tools. Like, anyone could literally do what I did for Event Pros community. Like, literally, you could use pay for Hublot, start utilizing it. You can set up, come up with a clever name, have great graphics, but like, really, it's about the strategy that gets done within that. And I've realized that like 90% of the work that I do is not anything technology related. It's literally as simple as creating a great space, like encouraging people, talking to people about it, encouraging new members to get value from it, all those things like that. And that's not technology, it's strategy.
Exactly.
I love that so much. I think it's something that quite some event professionals kind of overlook. Like, you want to have the best tool that matches your strategy, but if your strategy isn't in place, what good does the best tool do for you? So, very important takeaway here. With that, I think thank you so much for showing us a little bit in your day-to-day life and what you are experiencing with event technology. I would also really love to hear some of the horror and or funny stories you've experienced. I know this is the part of the show where we have quite a few good laughs, so I'm always looking forward to it. Marie, can you start off with yours?
Okay, I don't know if it's a horror one or a funny one. I think it's like between the two. I remember during a virtual event, I think it was 2021, um, there was a session. It was about the next generation of event professional and how we can help them, what they're going to bring to our industry, and, the insights that we had to give them. And I remember that it was fully virtual, and the speaker was open to have some attendees get on stage and, sharing their thoughts and best advices for the next gen. And I remember there's one of the attendee that has been selected just came on stage and was just super frustrated about the topic and was disagreeing about talking about the next gen, when we had even professional, very experienced people that are looking for jobs, because we were still in the COVID situation. So it created a very awkward situation, because even the speaker wasn't expecting attendees being, disagreeing and being so frustrated and saying that this topic was not appropriate. So it was kind of, we saw the chat slowing down. We were all at home, but I remember I felt so uncomfortable alone in my office. And it was kind of, we could feel the silence, but virtually. And it was just, so uncomfortable situation for a few minutes. But then I remember the speaker just, took back the conversation and thanked the attendees for joining the stage. And I mean, the ending was fine. I think the speaker did great, but I remember it was the first time that I was truly feeling uncomfortable. And then all the teammates, after, we were just discussing about it, and it was just like, yeah, what happened? Yeah, just let's not talk about it. It was just an awkward situation, but we were not prepared to that. And I think it just, taught us that we need to get ready, because when you're offering a space for a community, it means that everybody can have, their voice and they can express themselves. So sometimes you have to get ready for those kind of situations. So I think this was my most uncomfortable moment. if I'm not talking about technical issues that happened in the past. But yeah.
I can definitely relate to that. Like I've had a similar experience but that was in the chat where someone was just typing everything in capitals and he was like being so aggressive, and then it impacts all the attendees. And it's something, the first time it happens, you're like, wow, I didn't even expect it would happen, because everyone is here because they love the topic, and they, like, why else would you join this session? Some people just need to get something off their chest. And if you have a professional speaker in place, that's very important. But yeah, indeed.
But I think, like, because the person was on camera, it's not even just in the chat. Like the person was on stage. It was even more uncomfortable because we're like,
absolutely.
Okay, so
Am I allowed to sidebar on non-event tech? Sorry. I have a non-event version of that story too.
You heard about it?
I had at one time I was speaking in a class. So I speak back at my alma mater, Arizona State University, like about like entrepreneurship. I do like the event classes and stuff. And one of my most common talks is telling the story of how I started my company, like when I was 17 to where I am now. Not necessarily where I am now, but like right when I was out of college, to try to inspire people to start companies, right? This guy, we'd get through the whole entire talk, and I think it was like halfway through or whatever it was, he asked me a question, and he was just like, yeah, he's like, you mentioned like, you used to spin EDM. Well, you mentioned like artists like Tiesto and blah, blah, blah. And like, I'm really old school EDM guy. Like I've been around the block for a long period of time. He's like, those guys aren't even popular, blah, blah, blah. They're not even that good. Like, and I've never even heard of you before. And I was like, dude, because I don't DJ anymore. I run an event management company. But I remember he was just so aggressive. And at one point he was just like, yeah, I've never heard of you before. And I remember hearing an audible gasp from everybody else in the class. And at one point he said like something like really mean, like something like, you suck or something like that. And I remember just being like, okay, I can like come with a witty remark or whatever it was. And I was just like, I'm going to make this guy feel bad. I was like, dude, that hurts my feelings. That's like not a human nice thing to do or whatever it was. And like, I totally put myself like on the slab. He just doubled down. And you literally like at one point I was just like, like so blown away that this guy was just so aggressive. And I just realized like there's people out there that literally to them, it's like, that's their attention seeking moment, So that's a non-event tech version story of a fail that I've had before. So yeah, that was like the most uncomfortable I've ever been as a speaker.
Any top tips on how to deal with that?
The thing I learned is like, hey, like my job in that moment was not to like look cool or anything like that. My job was in the moment was to make the rest of the audience empathize with me more. And like everybody in that room knew that guy was a jerk. Apparently he's done this before to like other speakers. So like my job was just to be like, show him that I'm human and that this guy was a dick, and, to be like, look, I'm still a good human guy. Cause I think like if you try to antagonize whatever it is, like it can sometimes flip on you and you look like now you're the jerk or whatever it is, And so I just kind of just kept my cool and just tried to like be like, okay, what would I want someone to say? Cause like I've been there before as being a bully when I was like in middle school, right? And in the moment you're like, I'm gonna do this to look cool or whatever it's gonna be, I'm not a bully in any sort. This is like the one time I bullied somebody, and I remember that it happened and everyone turned to me and was like, why'd you do that? Like, what the heck? You're such a bad. And I remember like trying to act all proud, but like immediately having regret. And it taught me to like never do that again, because I realized like he's a human and I just look like a dick in front of everybody else. So yeah.
Really love that. Make the rest of the like the audience emphasize with you, and in that also show that person their place, but not give them too much attention. Totally. Any tech-related horror or funny?
Tech-related one. So there's probably one of the most embarrassing event technology ones I had was early on in the pandemic. We had a partner reach out and was like, hey, we want to do this virtual event together. Can you do like all the production for it? And I remember like, we loved this partner. I wanted to make things happen for them. And we were the busiest we had ever been. And I was like, yeah, we're going to make this happen. And I remember throwing some endless resources at it. But the problem was like, I wasn't ready to commit full costs and full needs. And I wasn't really ready to like dive 100% and treat them like as if they were a customer. So one of the event technology like stories that I learned is like, if you try to half-ass something, unless like you're prepared for it to fail, it's probably going to fail. So that was like one of the most, I remember the most embarrassing, like all of like the people I respected, I had friends in the audience, the whole event failed. Like it just completely, like all the technology went wrong at once. It was a multitude of things. It was primarily our fault, but also like poor pre-production plan. We had more speakers show up than were planned for. So it caused all this event technology issues, and we ended up having to like do a stop on the event. It was so embarrassing, and I fucked up so big. Sorry if I'm not allowed to cuss on this podcast, but I messed up so big that I remember being so embarrassed by it. And I learned in that moment, I was just like, years ago, I made a rule that was like, I'm never going to donate my services for free, because we're always going to finding ways to cut corners that leads to issues, and you're not showing off your best foot forward. So I think the thing I recognized with it was, don't bite off more that you can chew, especially if there's no budget to do things. And also just be prepared that like what's going to happen when everything goes wrong. And I wish I had prepared for that moment, because then I probably would have handled the subsequent like reactions and frustrations I got then as part of that too.
So did you lost the account?
Oh yeah, basically, yeah. Like I basically like they're like, we're gonna do production with someone else. Will, you can stay on as an MC. It was like one of those events where like it was definitely more of an influence play than anything. And I definitely learned a lot, and I feel so bad because like definitely like we immediately knew what went wrong and what could have been improved on it on there too. And I feel like we would have improved it for the next time around, but they had to make the best choice for their business at that point too. So I think that was one thing I learned was like, yeah, when you're really busy and you don't have the ability to put money and time and resources into it, you should probably just say no.
Sometimes it's just better to say no, but a very good learning. And I think most of the time when everything terribly fails, that is where you learn the most. So the next one, I'm sure the other events were 10 times better than that one.
It ran much better at that point. And we also learned things too that then we implemented. Like we were like, oh, we should make this a rule for all of our paid clients too, that they can't do this sort of thing, and why pre-production is so important, and test runs and all those things like that.
But it makes me remember beginning of pandemic, most of organizers, when they were using a tech platform, they were not testing with the speaker. Like they were not testing the sessions or the roundtables with the speaker. At the beginning, we saw so many, tech issues and fail because of that. It's something that we learned in the past 2 years as well.
100%. I've had quite a few sessions where like the session already started and the person was still trying to figure out how to turn on the camera, and it was the audience is just sitting there like, okay, this was a professional speaker.
We did an award show one time. It was an award show, I think it was, and we did all the test checks. We always tell people, present where you're going to be at if you're doing it virtual. And we had somebody show up and present from their phone in a car. They weren't driving, but still in a car. And we're like, what part went through your mind where you're like, I'm going to be a presenter or a moderator, and I'm going to just do this from my car while it's moving?
Talking about dynamic content, it's that's
it ended up working out okay, but we're all like, where's this person? They're in their car. Oh my gosh. Okay, we'll make this happen.
You still remember that session, right?
Yeah,
you
yeah.
still 100%. Remember it.
Yeah, I heard there's some even crazier stuff that's happened before, but that's just like, lots of little random stuff like that.
I love it. Such amazing stories, like also terrifying stories, to be honest. But it's good to know that that's also out there. With that, like, I would really love to hear from you. If you look at everything you've learned so far and where we're currently at in the industry, what is your key takeaway? What is something you really want event professionals to know right now? Marie, can you give us your tip?
I know we mentioned it during this, conversation, but I really think that strategy is the key, and the technology, it's a tool to get to your goal, but it's not the whole thing. So I really think that organizers should not forget that the strategy is bigger than the technology tools. And another thing that Will mentioned earlier, like thinking outside the box. Because with this
crush the box, just take the box and just destroy it.
Yeah, even better. But just, keeping brainstorming all the time, because with the technology explosion in the past years, it feels like everything is evolving so quickly, and I mean, right now we're talking about 365 year-round engagement. We think we have best practices, we think we have strategies, but audiences are going to get used to it. It's like marketing tactics. We're getting used to, those type of cold emails. We don't read them anymore. So I think we will need, to constantly renew our ideas and try to be creative and, just think about new ways constantly. Because there's no secret, there's not one way to do things. Yes, there are best practices, but what we're talking about today won't be the elements we're going to be talking about in the next 2 months. So those would be my advice.
That's a very powerful advice, or two very powerful advices. Will?
Dang, you stole mine. The crush the box is like my favorite thing to tell people to do right now. But I'll add in that like our attendees have changed over the last, 3 years. And you just have to think about the fact that you've changed, right? If you don't believe me, just think about how you've changed in the last 3 years. And if you've changed, your attendees have changed. And I'm even talking about in terms of like, their behaviors have changed. Completely, you might have an attendee who said, I'm never coming back to that conference. I'm going to a different one. And that person might be then coming in. So everything shifted around. So that's where that strategy that Marie talked about is so important, and why we also have to be open to just throwing out the playbook and starting with something new. We got to take our hand out of the coconut. Otherwise, keeping our hand trapped in that coconut is what can be what kills us, I think, as event professionals. But let me think of something new off the top of my head that everyone needs to know about for sure, is that I think that we also have to be open to complete new formats of events as well. We've debated about this on on Event Brew about whether larger events or smaller events are better. There's been this conversation of, hey, should we go to more regional events rather than doing one big annual conference and making everybody come in? We talk about like, how do we make actual sustainable differences in our events, right? Like, oh, hey, maybe we should go 100% virtual. I think too many people are relying on not only that playbook, but also just like the fundamental idea of what an actual event can look like. So what I would recommend to everybody is just like be open to the idea of trying something completely different. And I think right now we have this period where attendees are open to new ideas and trying different things, but come 2-3 years from now, everything's going to get solidified again and everyone's habits will not change. There won't be an era defining pandemic going on. Hopefully we've gone through the economic mess that we've gotten into, right? Like all these things like that is all going to solidify. And so right now is your last chance, not necessarily to experiment, but to do something totally new that catches the eyes of an attendee. So that'd be my suggestion too.
I love that so much. It's something I've also been thinking about a while. Keep you updated on that. But with that, I think it's time to close off this episode. I want to thank you so much for the valuable insights, from the amazing stories, and really the tips and tricks here are very, very valuable. So I'm sure our listeners also value them very much. So with that, I would like to thank you also in name of our listeners. Thank you so much for being here. Any last words for our audience?
Marie, go ahead.
Well, I mean, thank you very much. And I'm always open to have strategic conversations. So get in touch anytime. Thank you very much for having me.
How about you, Will?
Thank you for having me. This has been a blast. I love talking about events. This is what I like basically do all day long, it feels like. And if you ever want to chat, you can find me on LinkedIn. Is probably the big social network I'm on. Come join the eventprofscommunity.com. And check out all of our content too. Like we talk about this stuff on our podcast and stuff like that too. So if you're listening to this podcast, hopefully you like our, Event Icons, Event Brew, or Event Tech podcast as well.
100%. The links to both your profiles will be in the description below. With that, thank you all very much. I hope you have an amazing day. Also, our listeners have an amazing day. Looking forward to the next Event Effect. It will be Wednesday, 2 weeks from now. Looking forward to having you there.
Thank you.